So you finally want to lock in. You and I both know that you're capable of so much more than you have to show for yourself today. And the reason isn't because you're lazy, but because there's something yanking you off course. You set a big goal for yourself, you get fired up, and you make a little progress, but then you start drifting. And a week passes, and then a month, and now it's November, and that goal you set back in January is still sitting in your notes app. Maybe you hear the productivity people saying you just need to take a cold shower and power through it, but as a therapist, I can tell you that's not the issue. Here's the thing, the problem isn't that you don't want it enough. The problem is that you're running on a kind of mental autopilot built to avoid discomfort, and that autopilot is quietly turning you into a drifter. When I say drifter, I mean somebody who doesn't actively choose their life, but instead floats downstream wherever the world is pushing them. The fix isn't more forcefulness. It's learning how your psychology actually works and installing a system that makes progress easier than avoidance. So I'm going to hand you that system today. 6 steps without any fluff that if you start to apply, you'll actually lock in and stop drifting. And I'll also give you an exercise that will help jumpstart the system right away. So this kind of drifting that I'm talking about wears a lot of disguises. Sometimes it looks like endless research or planning that seems to go on forever, but is actually just a form of avoidance. Or other times, it looks like picking the safe option, the safe job, the safe relationship or routine, not because it's right, but because it's available and easy. The common thread is the same, decisions getting made out of fear and habit rather than out of our sense of purpose. But here's the thing that most productivity advice misses. Willpower is a terrible source of fuel. When you rely on it and it runs out, you tend to just default back to whatever your environment and your conditioning has taught you to do. That's why the usual power through it advice, waking up super early and taking cold showers and stacking more goals and just get grittier, tends to fall apart. It works for about a week and then it fails you. So let's go deeper than just hacks. In plain English, your mind is like a ship. If it doesn't have a rudder, that thing that helps it stay on course, then you're just going to drift wherever the current takes you. And the current in this case is your comfort. Now, comfort isn't evil, but it's like a magnet. And you beat that magnet by setting a clear destination and removing the easy exits. So let's start with a quick win. I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pen or your phone, and I want you to write down one thing. If I were to complete blank by December 31st of this year, then I would be proud of myself. Don't overthink it. One thing, nice and short. When you write that down, you're making a decision that most people delay on for months. And that's going to become the North Star for everything else we're going to do in this video. So hold on to that piece of paper, but first I want to look at why does drifting really happen? There's 2 reasons, and the first of them is fear. Not the dramatic, scary kind, but the quiet kind, the fear of wasting your time or being judged or picking the wrong kind of path for your life. The second is habit loops. So your brain loves loops that it can run without thinking, scrolling when you're tired, snacking when you're bored, or picking later when you're unsure about something. What tends to happen is that one of our fears gets triggered, and then we end up in these kinds of habit loops, and we call it a day. And that day turns into weeks, and those weeks turn into a year, and suddenly you have a life that looks busy but feels like it's going nowhere. Now the thing is, you don't need to eliminate fear. You wouldn't be able to even if you wanted to. But you do need to get to a point where fear doesn't make your decisions for you. And that's going to require 2 things of you. On the one hand, it's going to require some deeper inner work looking at those fears and why they drive you so powerfully. On the second hand, on a more practical level, it's going to require you to anchor your time to a definitive purpose and actually consciously make the decision of how you're going to allocate your energy. It's only with that kind of conscious awareness of where the fear wants to take you that you can make a new decision. At first, that's going to be really difficult, but you're practicing this. You're putting in reps and growing a muscle that enables you to make those hard decisions. So I'm going to give you 6 steps that are going to make it much easier to do that. Let's look at them together. The first step is understanding what kind of drifting you tend to do. Before you try and fight the current, understand where it normally takes you. For one day, I want you to just sit down and notice what tends to send you into that kind of state. What kind of fears are coming up in your life that make you want to avoid them? Be brutally specific, not "I procrastinate." Instead, whenever Karen insults me at work, I tend to spin out in a shame spiral for 5 hours and try and stare at social media in order to make that feeling go away. Whatever that is for you, write it down. Once you've fully understood what that doorway is, then you're presented with a choice and an opportunity every time you notice that pattern coming up. Okay, the second thing, now that you've understood why you drift, we're going to help you start to make a new decision. You remember that sentence you wrote earlier, if I only accomplish X by December 31st, then I'll be proud of myself? Great. So what I want you to do is actually plan out in a very clear way, what is it that I would need to do? What actions would I need to take in order for that to be true at the end of this year? And also, I want you to imagine that that sentence ends with the word because. And I want you to fill in those deep reasons that you want to accomplish those goals. Because I want to have love in my life, because I want to make more money, because I want to be able to take my family on a vacation, or I want someone to be proud of me. Whatever those reasons are that are driving you to want to accomplish that goal, write them down. Make them clear and explicit. Then you can revisit those reasons whenever you're feeling doubt and reignite that flame of actual motivation, even when it's hard, not from a place of willpower, but from a place of purpose. Okay, so step 3, you've understood why you drift and you've understood where you want to go instead. Now the question becomes, how do I actually work with the fear that tends to drive me into avoidance? That voice in your head that wants to derail you isn't going to disappear just because you've written down your goals. It's still going to come up. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? What I want you to do is to list all of the things that you're afraid of, that you feel like are between you and your goal. Get really specific. And then I want you to organize them from the least scary to the most scary. And now that you have that, I want you to institute a new rule in your life. Every day, you're going to try one thing at the bottom of that ladder. And once you've conquered that, you can start to move your way up there. But every day, you're going to expose yourself on purpose to the stuff you're afraid of just a little bit more than you did yesterday. Whenever you notice that kind of fear coming up, ask yourself, what is one small act of courage that I can take right now in order to prove to myself that I'm capable of moving through this fear? The more you're able to practice that skill, the less fear is going to drive your life. Okay, the fourth step. This is where we fix your environment. If you just rely on willpower, then you end up losing the game to the environment you built yesterday. We need to rig the environment in your favor. I want you to take an inventory of the places where you tend to drift. Maybe that's in your bedroom or just generally in your house. Wherever that is, I want you to set up a 1-hour block every day where you don't spend any time there. You go somewhere completely different, somewhere where you feel inspired, where you're surrounded by the kind of energy that fuels your actual purpose. The goal here in this fourth step is to spend at least an hour a day immersing yourself in that environment where it's much harder or much less likely that you're going to get sent off on the momentum of that drifting state of mind. Whether that's a cafe or your friend's house or a library, wherever it is that you feel like you can actually be in tune with yourself and your purpose, trying to make daily contact with that environment is going to move mountains for you. And that brings us to step 5. What I want you to do is at the end of every day, sit down with yourself and ask yourself this question: did I do what I needed to do today in order to move myself towards that end of year goal? By doing this, you're starting to build up the momentum of conscious decision making like we were talking about earlier. If the answer is yes, wonderful, keep doing what you're doing. If the answer is no, ask yourself deeply, introspect, what was it today that caused me to drift? What emotions were coming up inside of me that made me feel like I needed to turn away from the life I want to live? After you've been doing that for a while, you can move on to step 6, which is sitting down and actually looking at whether or not there are repeating patterns of how you start to drift and avoid life. And my expectation is you will see one specific pattern that tends to dominate for you. And once you've identified that, here is my suggestion: that you find one person in your life who you feel genuinely safe and understood by, and tell them about that pattern, even though it feels a little bit scary. Ask them if they've got something similar, and if they do, try to form some kind of accountability buddy system with them where you try to keep them on track and not falling into their pattern, and they try to keep you on track, not falling into yours. If you can create that kind of a relationship with somebody, it's going to take you there so much faster. Now, I want to talk about failure, because inevitably, if you try and implement this system, these ideas, you're going to have days where you fail. And I want to recommend that you cultivate as much self-acceptance of your failure as you can. Why? It sounds a little counterintuitive, but the reason is because if you can do that, you're actually going to have the necessary ingredients to be able to pick yourself up off of the ground and try again the next day. When we fall into self-rejection, when we start saying, oh, I'm the worst, I can't believe I did that, then guess what? We bring up all of the exact negative feelings that tend to make us want to start drifting and avoiding our life again. So don't fall for that trap. Try to cultivate as much acceptance as you can of days where it just didn't work out. If there's one thing you take away from the video, let it be this: that people do not fail because they lack willpower. They fail because they allow fear and habits to run their life and make their decisions for you. So to the best of your ability, try to cultivate self-awareness around the things that make you feel afraid and the kind of habits that fear leads you into. If any of this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. It really helps a new channel like mine and you get more content like this. And if any of you are looking for a therapist, feel free to reach out. There's a link in the description. But all the love. I'll see you in the next one.